Okay, welcome to this final session of the afternoon. Kerry's going to go ahead and introduce our panelists in just a minute here, but I did want to remind everyone that there will be a networking reception at 6 o'clock over in the Charles Hotel, and if you signed up to attend dinner, we're also having dinner over there, and Jeff and Janine Yast will be giving a talk, so I think that'll be a lot of fun, but just keep that in mind. Now why don't we go ahead and turn to the panel. It's titled Measuring What Matters, How Are Emerging School Models Defining Success? And I'm going to go ahead and let Kerry McDonald introduce our panelists.
Thanks, Dan. I'm Kerry McDonald, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Economic Education and the author of the new book, Joyful Learning. I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce today's panelists, starting with Heather DiNino, who's one of the over 50 founders that I write about in Joyful Learning. So thrilled that Heather's here. Heather is a former Massachusetts public school teacher and department chair. She taught in Massachusetts public schools for over a decade and is the founder of Elements Academy, which is a microschool located south of Boston. Any locals? It's in Braintree, Mass. And next to Heather is Josh Lange, the president of the Digital Financial Aid Corporation, which is a nonprofit dedicated to democratizing education by leveraging digital assets. And next to Josh is Caitlin Sienkiewicz, who is the founder of Condie Consulting, helping partners to design strategy, shape policy, and develop impactful programs. She also co-hosts Quality Matters, a podcast with Shaka, who's next to her. And Shaka Mitchell is a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children and, again, co-host of Quality Matters.
Great. So I think who's first from Heather? Why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Sure. So, hi everyone. It's so great to be here, especially this time of day. I really appreciate the fact that you could find the room and like somewhat stay awake. So move if you need to, do what you need to, take care of yourself. I'm really grateful to be here. This community really supports everything that we're all doing. So it's always great to see each other in person. I founded a micro school like most micro school founders. It was for my own kids. I was a burnt out public school special educator. But it's so much more than that. And going into our 6th year, and we're celebrating our 6th birthday because that's the compulsory school age, right? Like once kids are 6, parents have to make that decision about what their education is going to look like. And so we're celebrating our 6th birthday and thinking about like, what does that mean for us? And what do we think it means? What do parents want that to mean for their kids? And, you know, I read a quote somewhere, basically what we measure shapes our culture. So I don't have a fancy presentation, but like if you take one thing away from today that I say, I want it to be that. What we measure shapes our culture. So as we're here thinking and talking about different ways of measuring, that's all right. A little bit of water doesn't hurt anyone. We all need to hydrate more. You know, if we're thinking about like what we measure shapes our culture, and Don this morning talked about so many different ways of measuring, like he could have taken half my presentation, right? Like so many different ways to measure. But what are we actually measuring? And because of this emerging schools model, we get to measure differently, is the way I view it. Like, how can we be really purposeful about what we're measuring and why? And so one of my favorite educators always asks these 3 questions. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And who are you doing it for? And as a public school teacher, it was not enough for me to be like, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. I have no idea why I'm doing it, except that I'm going to get in trouble if I don't. And I don't even know who I'm doing it for, because it's not for the kids. It's not really for the parents. And the principal doesn't even agree with it half the time. So it's not really for them either. So when I'm running my micro school and we're talking about scaling and we're talking about like all these different micro schools and this movement and homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling, game schooling, all these different types, right? We're all going to measure differently. So I think what's really important is to think about what are you measuring, what are you doing, why, and for who, right? So for me, just a quick anecdote, we measure joy. We measure mental health. We think mental health matters more than anything. We think who you are is more important than what you know. And so we measure creativity, curiosity, and connection. One of my families is trying to get the district to pay for my school, which in Massachusetts is never going to happen. And she said, they want data. And I said, well, what does that mean to you? And she said, well, my son came out of a partial hospitalization program after trying to commit suicide twice and self-harming for months without them knowing. We learned that we could no longer ask him how he was because he wouldn't be able to answer. So they've trained the parents to ask for his safety number, 1 through 5. How safe do you feel? And his safety number for months before entering Elements Academy was a 4 or a 5, meaning 5 is take me to the hospital now, please. And it was around a 4 or a 5, and she said, he's been at Elements for 2 months, and his safety number has not gone above a 2. So if that's not data, I don't know what is, right? So I don't care about standardized tests. I care more about a safety number. Everyone has to make their own choice, but if what we're measuring is what we're scaling, we have to be really intentional about what we're measuring and why we're doing it. So that's it. I want to keep it short. I want lots of time for questions, but that's me.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Hamlin and Kerry McDonald, for moderating this. And this is my first time actually speaking at Harvard, but I've had quite a few run-ins with Harvard over the years. I first changed to multiple intelligences in 2004 when I heard about the theory and met Howard Gardner. And over the years, he's anybody know multiple intelligences theory? Yeah, most people do. Howard Gardner, he's a Harvard professor right over here. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. But I have been informally mentored by him as one of my mentors over the years because I've been very interested in informal education, what's called informal, non-formal, unaccredited education, character education, all these things that everyone here cares about. Basically, the stuff that's not A, B, C, D, paper and pencil tests. And the reason is because I actually create those tests. So anybody heard of the Cambridge IELTS test, TOEFL test, GRE exam, GMAT, these SAT exams? So all these exams are based on quantitative comparison of students. And I've worked as a computational linguist and linguist at Cambridge University, as well as UCL and other universities, to ensure test quality at the highest level and also to integrate technology, so artificial intelligence. So, and this is something that's come up in the last years. And you know what? I know a lot about success because I've seen students and I've helped students, dozens of students from all countries in the world get into Harvard University, get into Stanford, get into Princeton. And you come in and you might meet somebody from China here and you say, they might have perfect English, but then you meet somebody else and you're like, wow, they're making all kinds of mistakes. How'd they get into Harvard? Because my system enables a person to overcome general English and go right to specific and beat the test, all right? And I make a lot of money doing that. Well, I did, but now I'm in crypto because I invented a technology that everybody uses, and so I'm really happy about that. And I wanted to ask today, because one of the things that we found over the years is that people don't actually complete online courses and distance work. Have you found that? I mean, with your work as well? Well, it's true. I mean, and you're not the only one. So I've been in online learning since 2006, all right? And I did actually a Harvard certificate in early childhood education via distance when I was building schools in Japan. But it was a great certificate. But the thing is that back then it was like 1 to 5%. Now, it's still not over 10% of people actually complete these MOOCs, these free online courses from Harvard and everywhere else. And well, why not? Well, we want to talk about standards and measuring things. Well, because, they don't get anything out of it. With my private company, we started to give our students a little bit of crypto, because I have a lot of it. And that worked wonders. Surprise, surprise. And we connected it to digital badges that they could earn, like micro-credentials, as they're completing modules, as they're completing work. So if you could put those two things together and you have cryptocurrency inside a digital badge, now you have a micro-scholarship, you have a tracking mechanism, you have a funding mechanism, and you have an accounting mechanism. In addition, you don't need any third parties, and you own the data, okay? Now, when Ms. McDonald here talks about unschooling, you know, who owns your certification? If I lose my, my Cambridge degree, I went to Cambridge, the other Cambridge, then I have to go to Cambridge to get that degree. If they say, oh, well, we don't teach that anymore, or we don't believe in that anymore, then you can lose that. And so the question is, who defines success? And when does success begin? My good friend, who's also at Harvard, Murad Farid, who has a fund here in the public health, he tells me, he works in maternal health, that the first success is actually in the third trimester of pregnancy. Then if a baby can survive from the second to the third trimester of pregnancy, he said there's like 90% better life, your whole life. And your whole life's determined. And then you have your next success. And then your next success. And so success builds on success. And what Aristotle said was that success is actually a practice. It's a habit. It's not one time. And you know, the last panel here was talking about teacher certification, teacher education, continued teacher training. Well, why don't we give teachers a little bit of crypto for taking their further education too, right? And why don't we give administrators recognition for what they're doing in these micro schools, in these home schools and things like that? They don't get any recognition. Just like a lot of people that are illegal immigrants or people that are cash workers and don't have regular jobs and don't get into Harvard, don't get any recognition at all. As a matter of fact, 8 million illegal immigrants don't have a single qualification. And a lot of them are doing the main jobs. But I have a gift for you guys if you want, and so you can see how this kind of system works. I got some crypto. And I'd like to give this out to leaders of schools or programs or initiatives who are virtuous. You know, I don't come from one of the legacy families, but I am a direct descendant of Aristotle. And so these are Aristotle badges for virtuous leaders, and they contain some Bitcoin. And all you have to do is not be afraid of Bitcoin and also be a virtuous leader. So how many people are leaders of schools or organizations in Sinton? Yeah? Okay. Now, how many people would like some Bitcoin? Okay, good. All right. Keep your hands up, you know. All right. And now the last thing is, and I'm going to give these out to everybody who has their hand raised still, who wants Bitcoin, and this will be last thing, is who's willing to agree that they will use artificial intelligence only in the way that they tell others to use it, and with the virtues and values that they themselves espouse. You saw that? Good. Because let me tell you something, guys. My main area was overcoming cheating. I built 3 universities, over 100 programs to overcome cheaters. And this is exactly the thing to do, is to model the virtue. Yeah, all right. So guys, come talk to me after. And we'll talk to you exactly how to get your cryptocurrency. It's a lot easier than you think now. And so there we go. And then one more to the lady here. Thank you very much. It's because you are all success, in my opinion. It's not just thinking about how do we measure success with the children, how do we measure it with ourselves. And these are some example badges here. Can you go to that webpage with that other one, the link that I sent you? So we built a platform here that you can define success. You don't need a third party. This is a nonprofit organization paid for by me, paid for with crypto. It runs itself. You can get on there. We can have your school on there. You can create as many digital badges worth cryptocurrency as you want. You can create it for any purpose you want. If you're a Christian educator, if you're an abnormal educator, if you think outside the box, you know, if you do different things, you can have your own system. And then you say, well, okay, how does this relate to the K-12 certification in schools? Well, this is how it relates. What you can do is you can take artificial intelligence very easily and take one of these badges, open in browser. Okay, because the data that you have, I don't trust. I don't trust Harvard. I don't trust the government. I don't trust anybody. Harvard just removed the tenure of a professor who said, they didn't teach me data management in my doctoral PhD program, okay? But I don't have that excuse like she does, all right? And here's the reason, because you got the blockchain. And the blockchain is here for you, and it's independent. There's no government that can take this from you. Then the ownership is yours. You have to be careful because there's a lot of fakes, a lot of cheats, a lot of scams, and AI is making this lot bigger. And so if you want to define success, you can do it on your terms, but you have to do it without the institutions, without a third party, and you can do this on GetSmartToken.com, and you can do as many as you want, and nobody can, this can be on any site. It works across all sites. You don't need any software. And this is my daughter. Just wanted to show you, we just gave her an award at the crypto event. I know I look a bit disheveled, is because I came on an overnight bus. I was actually performing Elvis at the Hard Rock Cafe Times Square last night at midnight, but I said I had to come to Harvard because I was invited by this young gentleman. And you see, here's the youngest baby right here. Yes. And one of the things I learned about success, she's got some early success. Hey, everybody! One of the things I learned about success from her is actually walking. You see how she's like this? She's been like this for 4 months, since she was 4 months old, and she's always standing in my hands. 2-3 hours a day. We say every day is legs day with Layla, right? But the fact is if I want her to stand up, she can stand. You know what? But watch. She's going to go down. But what we see, if we're not looking, and sometimes until she realizes, she's standing up on her own. The children are doing things without knowing it. They're acting. And we just need to capture that, all the great stuff that you're doing. And then you can triangulate that with the state system by simply looking at what the standard is in the state system and connecting your experiential real world or here you go, student-centered or student-driven. Thank you. Layla Van Lange, everybody. If you want to talk to me about that later, but I'm really honored to be up here with this panel of leaders and really excellent people that are changing the world and going against the grain. Trust me, us in crypto, we know what it's like to go against the grain, and you guys are fighting a really good fight against Goliath, so amazing.
Okay, great. Thank you. I did not know we were going to hand out Bitcoin, but maybe you should be invited more often.
Well, this is actually my third stop. I did the first crypto transactions with a live audience at UNESCO last year, and then with the Pope and Vatican this year, and now this is my third stop, Harvard. So you got that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Shaka and Caitlin.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, Dan, I want to say, I've never done ketamine, but I have been to Harvard's emerging school models on the panel. So thanks, Josh and Kerry, Heather, Caitlin. So Caitlin and I are going to tag team this a little bit because Quality Matters is really a joint project. And we'd like to start just with a really quick video to kind of intro the show and explain it in 2 minutes rather than listening to me for 10.
Welcome to Quality Matters, where we speak with experts across industries to see how their perspectives can inform our pursuit of high-quality education for all students. I'm Shaka, and this is Caitlin, and we're happy to be your guides for this limited series.
Like you, Shaka and I are passionate about all students having access to a great education, and quality is a driving force behind our work. But what does quality really mean? In an era where parents can customize their child's education, this question is more important than ever.
I believe in demand-driven reform.
Okay.
So empower people with the knowledge and the skill set to make demands.
Sure.
Strengthen their ability to make demands of the system. So that's why in Miami-Dade and in Los Angeles Unified, we launched the Parent Academy. And the Parent Academy had one single goal, empower parents with dangerous information. We put them in a position of knowing the system, understanding the system, being able to compare, assess, analyze, and then make demands on the basis of what their children may not be getting and should be getting.
Wow.
Empowering parents into being fiery and fierce fighters for their kids is one of the strongest ways they can enact on educational reform.
When I was a kid, there was like one type of apple. It was a red, delicious apple, but they're terrible. They're like dark red, they're waxy. Now everybody knows that Honeycrisp apples are the best.
Yep.
Okay, Honeycrisp literally did not exist when I was, a school-age kid. And so the question is, how do we find kind of the Honeycrisp among these emerging schools, these new models? But we don't have time to wait 30 years.
Right, we can't miss those kids.
We can't miss those kids, right?
But something that was so interesting that both of them touched on in different ways, Eric's in the education space, Ben in that business and technology space, was this idea of the quality of input being the determinator for the quality of output.
During each session, we'll hear from leaders in education, technology, business, sports, and the arts. We hope to apply their insights to our pursuit of a great education in the K-12 space.
Join us on this journey to secure a great education for all children. This is Quality Matters.
Yeah, so let me give you just a little bit of the origin story. Caitlin will talk about the format of the show, which you just heard a bit of, and then very quickly we'll just give you some of the quick highlights, and then I know Kerry and Dan want to move on to Q&A. And so, kind of the origin story. I'm a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children. We work to enact school choice programs around the country at the state level. And as most people in this room are aware, we've been pretty busy. We, along with lots of other allies and other advocacy organizations, have been really busy and really successful in the most recent 5 years. Now, over 50% of the nation's children are eligible for a private choice program, which is really amazing. You've got states like Florida where 500,000 kids participate in a private choice program, another 400,000 in charter schools. Just really staggering numbers and new programs coming online. That being said, especially with the proliferation of education savings accounts, programs that allow greater flexibility than a single-use, say, school voucher or scholarship, one of the questions that we get all the time from policymakers, but also from parents, is they ask, is the program working? And as Heather has indicated, that's not a simple question. There are so many different domains around which we can answer it, but we wanted to at least start that conversation, and so that's kind of how we started the show, is just to get input from other folks.
Yeah, and I think there's two unique sort of components to our format. So not only are we having conversations with people in the education space, but we're actually having conversations with people and leaders in many different sectors: healthcare, technology, business, hospitality, restaurant, tours. And what we realized, and what we confirmed, because we hoped this was the case, is that there's a lot of different ways that other sectors are measuring their success, the ways they're measuring their qualities. There's a lot of different intents. And so as we have these conversations with people in all different lines of work, we realized that we could take their best practices and start applying them to education, and sort of the experiences that Shaka and I have had, but also the experiences that we're aware of. So many of our episodes sort of take outside perspectives to inform what quality can look like in education. So that's sort of one unique part of our formatting and our sort of model. The second part is that we actually break down our episodes into two sections. So our first bit of the episode is a conversation between the two of us and the guest. Questions, trying to better understand their work, what they do, and again, what quality looks like, the input before, the output, the measurements, all of that. And then the second part is this breakdown, which is just a conversation between Shaka and myself, and it really goes into what we learned from the guest, what we heard, what we thought was interesting, what we had additional questions on, And in that time, we like to sort of bridge together many of the different conversations. So perhaps we were inspired by something that our guest in that episode said, but it connected to many of the other episodes we've had. So because of the origin and sort of how that transpired, we have found that this model for our conversations and our podcast has been really interesting and helpful in broadening our scope and our awareness of what classrooms look like, what education looks like, what instruction looks like, what delivery looks like. And yeah, it's created sort of a robust ecosystem of quality and different ways to discuss it, different ways to analyze it, and hopefully different ways to implement it.
Yeah, and just very, very quickly, and thanks to Dan, Kerry have both been guests on our show. Other folks who are at this conference, and we're recording a bunch of them today and tomorrow as well. So thanks to our team of videographers who are doing that. But when you think about defining quality, I mean, again, this is not going to surprise anyone, but if you've got 50 people in this room, or maybe more, we're going to have more than 50 different definitions. That being said, it's our belief that we can't throw our hands up and say, well, that just means we can neither define nor measure this. That, to us, is just an untenable position. It's not one that we think is going to serve kids long term, even appreciating that there are so many different ways to define it. Here's a couple different ways that people have thought about it who've been guests. So Ashley Berner, who many of you are familiar with, friend at Johns Hopkins, she thinks about quality in the areas of both the way in which school is delivered and paid for, sort of pluralism, what she would call pluralism. She also thinks about civic formation, and she thinks about a common conversation, even though there are different modes of instruction. She said it's not just about academic scores, it's about building citizens, right? So that's one way she's thinking about it. I know our friend Kerry, we talked a lot about some more parent and market-driven sort of indicators of quality and about of whether or not a particular model is working and serving the needs of its community. A guy named Max Skolberg, who owns a number of different and wildly different restaurant concepts, like high-end to like sports bars and all sorts of things in between. To him, word of mouth was really important. He also said, are there moments and memories that are created such that the customers want to tell someone else? He was really thinking a lot about the experience and how they're drawing folks in. And Caitlin, you want to just talk really quickly about some of those components?
Yeah, so despite the fact that you could have 50 people and all 50 people would have different definitions of quality, there have been some common components that everybody sort of touches on and that everybody sort of considers when they're looking at the quality of their work or the quality of their outputs. Some people have articulated that a necessary component for something high quality is the people that you're working with. So that goes to not just making sure you have people that are mission aligned, but also people that are well trained and that are equipped to handle the work that is set in front of them. Another element of this notion of quality that people discuss is the term accountability. I don't know if Patrick Wolf is in here, but there's lots of discussion, how do you hold people accountable? What should accountability look like? And who is accountable for the quality of the schooling that the children are getting, or the quality of the life of the child after they leave the schooling? So this notion of accountability has been big. A third element is culture. So this has been a very fascinating component to better understand outside of education. I think a lot of people discuss this notion of school culture. And when you look at government systems, or when you look at restaurants, or when you look at hospitals, and better understand how those different sectors are actually creating and establishing impressive culture, and the tools they're using and the ways they're doing it, when you apply it to school, they're actually quite applicable. And so that's been a neat element to consider. And then the last notion or component that sort of leads to quality is this idea of context. You really can't understand what the quality is of a program, what the quality is of a student's experience, if you're not understanding the context. So making sure that the context is not only addressed, but it's understood by everybody, those who are measuring quality, but also those who are assessing it and sort of creating the tools to try and achieve it. We go in through our conversations to lots of other elements regarding quality. Measurements is huge. That's obviously, I would say, probably one of the most complicated components of quality, especially in this world of emerging schools, emerging school models, because everything's different. It's like the best part and the most complicated part. You know, you're thriving on this novelty of these new ways of instructing students and giving them individualized attention and meeting their needs. But how do you measure and, you know, sort of ensure that quality looks the same? Is it even necessary to do that? So this concept of measurements has been complicated and dynamic, but we certainly go into that. It's hard to discuss quality without addressing the outcomes and the outputs. So what do those look like? What are people deeming as the outputs of schooling? Is it how a child is able to situate themselves in the world? Is it that they can get into an additional higher education experience? You know, there's lots of different definitions, so we break those down. And I think I'll end there and turn it back over to you guys so as not to take up too much time.
All right, thank you. This issue of measuring what matters, I think, has been a tough one at this conference. We haven't really gotten very far pinpointing things, I would say, in many of our panels. And I was really excited when I heard about the work you're doing. And I'd be curious to know, is there something you've come across where you feel like, here's something we see schools measuring well, it's something schools should measure, and you know, this just makes a lot of sense, and they can actually collect data that gives you a credible estimate of some kind of outcome. Have you seen anything like that out there?
It's a great question.
For us.
Well, it could be specifically, but I'm sure other panels can respond as well if they like.
So, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in really quickly. I don't know how this is going to answer your question, but it's been a common theme, this idea of enrollment or sort of continuous engagement as a metric of satisfaction or as a measurement of quality of the programming. You know, if parents are continuing to send their children to option, inherently you would imagine that they're happy with it, so they want to keep sending their child there. And I think that has been, it's been talked about, I would say, in almost every one of our conversations. How do you, one way of measuring being this engagement, enrollment, you know, continuous support for the programming. But it's really interesting, and it got dynamic in one of our conversations, because that's not always the case for, that's not always a reliable, in conventional schools. Some students and parents send their kids to a school because they have to, because it's their zone school, because it works for their family, because that is that's the extent of the knowledge they have of their schooling opportunities or options. So I think this actually just complicates your question. I'm sorry I didn't actually answer it, because enrollment, attendance, engagement from parents and students, on one hand, is a great determinator. It's a great measure of whether or not they're happy because they're continuing to choose it. On the other, it gets very complicated if you take that out of context, or if you take it too far and you apply it to a situation where that's not the reason why attendance is so high or enrollment is, you know, sustainable.
Yeah. I would just add to that, Dan. I think that, you know, and I'm going to sort of butcher some of the economic terms here, Kerry, so I'll forgive me for that. But the engagement and attendance is a really valuable metric when information is high, when the choice is meaningful because someone can actually choose something else. And what that requires in the American system is that your dollars are portable so that you can do something else, or that you can have that the opportunity cost isn't so high if you wanted to do something like homeschool, et cetera, right? So I would sort of say that, engagement is engagement, enrollment, attendance, that's a big deal. In Florida, I would say that's a really big deal, because in Florida there are so many choice programs and the kids have such a range of options that I think it's pretty meaningful where they end up, and look at where they end up. In a place like New York, I would say that's not as meaningful, because if you're a kid in Hempstead, New York, in Nassau County, in Roosevelt, whatever, you don't have any choices. You don't have any meaningful choice. Your family is too low income to afford meaningful options. There aren't seats available. You likely can't do homeschool. So that's not as meaningful a metric. I think the opportunity, and I want to get my charge now so I can shut up for the rest of the panel, but I think the opportunity for folks in this room and at this conference is to help policymakers and parents articulate a definition of quality, because in the absence, there will be a definition supplied. We work in advocacy, we work in Capitol buildings. A definition will be supplied, and what we don't want is we don't want that definition to get articulated by people whose only experience with schools is a conventional brick and mortar zone school, and all they're thinking about are kind of very rigid, math and ELA scores. So if the folks at a conference like this aren't speaking into this moment, the train will leave the station, and we'll be really, really frustrated 10 years down the road when the measurement doesn't match the good work that's happening in your schools.
So I'm going to ask one final question from the panel, and then we'll open it up to everyone here. And this is a question for Heather. So the title of this panel, of course, is Measuring What Matters. And Heather, you said that each school founder has to decide what matters, and then families need to decide what matters to them and choose a school that's aligned with their distinct values and viewpoints. And my favorite chapter in my new book is chapter 4, that features your story, the story of the Elliott family, who absolutely adore Elements Academy. And this is a family that moved to an affluent community in the South Shore of Boston for the schools. They wanted their kids in high-quality, high-performing public schools. And their kids were doing fine, but it wasn't fabulous. Then COVID hit. And that was very, very challenging for their two daughters, or their two children who are non-binary. And they ended up dealing with significant mental health issues, including severe suicidal ideation and depression and anxiety. This was something that families were encountering all across the country as schools were shut down. And when I talked to the family, they said that when they found Elements Academy, they were skeptical at first. Could this really be a magical place? But were open-minded. And they said that within just the first few weeks, it was a complete turnaround for the children's mental health. And I said to the dad, specifically, I said, well, do you really think it was the school? Like, maybe there's other factors here. And he was certain, in no uncertain terms, that it was the school. So clearly you're doing something right, Heather. And what do you think it is that you're doing right that has this profound impact on young people?
I feel like I could sum it up just by saying what I'm pretty sure I also said on your podcast, which is that we let the children be who they are. So we get so in our adult brain and in our ego about measuring these things. And we at Elements, at least, we try not to. Like, we try to really let it be about the kids. And so to us, child-led means explore your identity. Like, what makes you you? Because there are all these blanket statements about diversity, but are you really allowing the kids to be diverse if you're still trying to put them in a box? So what we do is figure out who the kids are, what makes them unique. That goes with their love language, to their multiple intelligence, to their learning style, to their personality, their temperament, their interests, their gender, all of it. But it's really about creating a safe space so that they feel like they are able to be who they are and figure out who they are. And that's what we did for the Elliots. It's what every family right now would say about Elements Academy, is that we support their child. And that is like, that human to human connection is so, so important right now. And that is kind of an answer to your question too, Dan, because I think measuring attendance could look not great for certain schools that have kids that are spending 6 months at a hospital, right? So I think there are these really like quantitative ways of measuring things that matter. And I think the most important thing is that your what matters and the other end of what matters match, right? Like there are so many different types of restaurants you could go to, but you're not going to go to Taco Bell if you want like fine dining. It's just really clearly like not a match. So you just have to really, I think whatever you're measuring by having it be aligned and being as transparent as you possibly can, either as a parent or an advocate, a family member, a school founder, whatever your role is, just being really transparent. Because a lot of people would say Elements Academy is a horrible place. Like, we're not for them. We're not designed for everyone. Who we are designed for is going to say it's magical because we let the kids be who they are, and that is what that child and that family truly need. And that's what's really transformational.
I think one of the challenges as a researcher, when I hear a word like creativity, I hear that over and over. We do creativity at our school. As a researcher, I'm not sure there's any good empirical way of measuring creativity. I don't even know how you would begin to do that.
Yeah.
Well.
Talk to Eric about this.
And maybe there is.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
But actually, Gardner discussed this as back in the 90s, right? So a lot of this has been going. A lot of these ideas about student-centered learning and also measuring success even have been going back over 100 years. Even it's just the implementation is only now with you innovative folks. Now, I studied under Anna Kraft at Exeter University. She wrote a book with Howard Gardner on creativity, and there's basically there's two types that they say: little c creativity and big C creativity. Okay, little c creativity is what you think is creative with your kids. Oh my God, this amazing creative thing that you did. You wrote this story. You did this thing. You did this. But it's actually creative, right? Did you know the first creation of a human being, the first thing that they're proud about? This is according to Sigmund Freud.
Going to the bathroom.
That's right, poop. That's their first success, their poop, right? And it tends to be the same thing when you get into politics. But then there's a big C creativity, and that's like Bitcoin, for example. It's a changing a system that doesn't work, and it's so big that nobody can understand how one person could come up with something so brilliant. That's the kind of big C creativity. And now when you talk about measuring it, what Anna Kraft, and unfortunately she passed away, but she talked about creativity. She defined it as possibility thinking. So when we think about their students at our schools, are they thinking about possibilities? Are they curious? And these things like that. Now with our system, when you break it down to the very basics, I just want to really touch on this measuring aspect of it. When you touch it down to the very, very basics, and I want to hit on Florida, okay? Not hit on, I want to show you how you can take a homeschool, any homeschool activity, and then measure that for its success based on the frame that you've set, and then have that part of the accreditation so count as credit. This is the important thing, isn't it? Because what they're sending you, what they're shoving down to you, they're defining your student, who you are. What she's doing at her school, and thank God we have the opportunity to do this, is explore who they are and their own identity. But when that comes to standards, that can become problematic, right? Unfortunately, my daughter in Austria, who's 11, in Austria, they don't have any homeschool. They don't allow that. They wouldn't allow any of this kind of stuff that you're doing. You have to stick with a strict curriculum. And when her maths was failing, if you got that one link, when her maths was failing in school, we did a project, a baby changing table for her other little sister, Layla. So she did carpentry. But what I did is in advance, no, the other link I sent you, my friend. It's a private badge. The baby one's public, but you can make it private or public, so you can do whatever you want here. And you can also have auditors come in, and that's important for measurement. But there's basically 3 things to measure anything you want to then use for credit. You need a description, okay? The description of the activity or what it is that you want to measure, okay? And then you need to have an award criteria. All right, what are the criteria that I'm using to measure success in this? All right, you have to define that. And then the last thing you need, and this is in every case, we're doing this in standardized testing, and you could do this in qualitative or interpretive. The third thing you need is evidence. What do we count as evidence for this particular thing? So for example, with my daughter making a baby changing table, and you didn't get that link. With her making the baby changing table, we made one of these badges, and inside the badge is metadata, right? And that's with all digital badges, also in the blockchain. But inside the metadata, you'll have pictures. You'll have video of her doing the table. I have also AI write the description of what does it take for an amateur person to build this table like this, and then at the same time, independently, I have her write the story and the process in her own words. Then you can compare that, or an auditor like a teacher or the state system can compare that. With creativity, it's a little bit different. What Gardner says is that the multiple intelligences are human potentials in the brain that then have value as recognized by a culture. So if you're highly musically intelligent and super, super creative, then that will be valued by the culture, and that's the way to measure it. But basically, those 3 things: description, award criteria, and evidence. And you can have your activities actually standardized within any U.S. state system.
Okay, why don't we move to take some questions from the audience now? Yeah, Ryan.
I'd like to ask just a little context here. So if emerging school models are a decentralization that's occurring, like many decentralizations we're seeing, is a result of the system in collapse, essentially, and that's why it's being allowed, or people have the opportunity to explore alternatives now because the system doesn't serve them, or they don't see the legitimacy of the system anymore. How do we then talk about the measuring? How do we ensure that whatever measurement we do doesn't support an attempt to hold up the change, to restrict the decentralization and the opportunities, because it is such a threat. I mean, imagine the children you're educating who are able to question, like the system we have, there's no questioning. We've run into the verge of the Third World War because as a society, we can't question anything. That's the industrialization of the education system we've had and where it's put us. So, for example, if the purpose of our society, of our system, of our structure no longer works, we can't even survive it. We'll end up in a Third World War if we continue with it. How do we then find a new purpose, and how do we measure that? Because I think it all comes down to the purpose of the children, the purpose of the parents, the purpose of our society, and a result on some cognitive assessment as proof that the educator or the type of education you're doing is holding up what the system wants you to hold up. In other words, the children are devoid of critical thinking in the end. How does the system not fall to that, if that's answerable?
Oh, I wish it was answerable. We'd all be, I mean, God, it's a fabulous question. It's one that literally keeps me up at night, to be honest. My sister is a historian, and we kind of debate back and forth about this because, and then it came up this morning too, like what is the accountability to parents versus to the public? Is there accountability to the public? I don't know. What is something that we can all agree on, I guess, is what it comes down to. What is the common ground? Because we can see the collapse of systems, and then what? What do you rebuild? right? Like if systems are going to collapse, what do you rebuild and what do you rebuild them with? And I would imagine what I think I would want mine to be rebuilt with is different than everyone else in the room. So what is the common ground? What can everyone agree is education? Because there's debate over should they learn math? How should they learn math? Should they learn language? How should they, you could debate over literally everything. So is there a common ground? I guess it comes down to that, real foundation of we can see how schools have gotten completely away from actual child development, right? Like if we're looking at what child development, what kind of trajectories are naturally followed, that's not who was writing the Common Core, right? So there's a disconnect. What is the connection piece? I have no idea. I've completely more questions to your question. It's a great one, but I have no idea.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Shaka.
Well, I was just gonna mention. I think it is a really good question. I think a little bit about maybe the limitations of being a futurist. And what I mean there is, I think there's a temptation when you are, especially if you're raging against an existing system that is clearly failing, I think there's a temptation to assume that if you're not for that, you are against every component part of that, because you're driving towards a future that is so completely different, that we can't take any of the old ways. So to Heather's point, what are some of the things that we might continue to pull forward, right? The conventional public school system did not breathe life into itself, right? It came together. People did want this. They did want something like this. At some point, communities came together and said, hey, let's fund this, thus and such, we're gonna have buildings, whatever. So it's not devoid of some input and desire. Now, that being said, it has just, it's mostly a mess, right? And so I think it's like, how do we deconstruct it in ways that we say, all right, here are some component parts that we're gonna pull forward, right? We're gonna have, it's kind of like saying homeschool families may not feel like a big public school is the best for their kids. That doesn't mean that they don't want community. It doesn't mean that they don't want extracurriculars. It doesn't mean that they don't want academic performance necessarily, right? So I think we don't want to throw everything out and think we've got to be in some as yet untested future that nobody asked for.
I disagree completely. I think we should throw everything out because we're under a new paradigm, artificial intelligence, and soon artificial general intelligence paradigm, and we need to think about that. All of education needs to be completely transformed, and in addition, learning management systems are a thing of the past. All right, so we need to open up to a new direction, and just like understanding as these systems are falling, we need to take action and move forward on that, and that's exactly why we're trying to do things without third parties, independently, because the fiat system is falling apart. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but.
Yeah, I don't know if that's different. I think it is different. I don't know that it's that it runs completely counter, though. The reason that we still appreciate
all the people that are losing their funding.
The reason we still like things like crypto and Bitcoin is because guess what? People still want to trade. It's trade that's the underlying component. It's not because fiat money. Fine, we can quibble about that, but we're still trying to do some things that are part of the common human experience.
Right.
I think, I'm curious for you all to react to just like Shaka, you said that, there's going to be some measurement. And where does that come from? And I think part of, I don't take that for granted. Part of the point of this kind of Copernican revolution we're seeing is it's the impulse to centrally plan and to kind of set incentives. And if you read Randy Weingarten's book and you read stuff from the more nationalist right, it's both of them accept that there's got to be some kind of central kind of planning, and this kind of, what I call a kind of philosopher king mindset, right? The children, our children, right, as against some parents' children. So we're not it seems like we're taking for granted that there has to be some common measure, but that's the whole question. Why? Where is that coming from?
Yeah, no, it's a totally fair question. Yeah, go ahead.
When people are getting married,
Yeah.
if I was to stand up here and say, we can't just let people choose who they marry, like that's, like you're gonna end up in divorces and domestic abuse. Like we gotta have some kind of system and measurement. Like, because we're not on that premise, right? That sounds bizarre to us, but with education, it's like why do we have to go beyond you serving these kids? And specific contingent measures we need, right? Like what is creativity, but just generally, I'm not seeing where that's coming from.
So I think it's totally fair. I want to, we didn't give like extensive bios, whatever. I mean, I used to, whatever. Maybe this isn't far enough for some folks, but I spent years working at a libertarian law firm where we sued the government mostly. I'm not a big government. I'm not a government guy. I don't take this stuff for granted. But in the U.S. Like we're also not seasteaders. So in the U.S. we've got 50 states, and every state enshrines education in its state constitution. So when I think about the gravity that exists, I think that we are, regardless of what we do at this conference, regardless of how it grows, and I believe it will continue to grow over years, regardless of that, every state has a constitutional duty to pay for some kind of system of education. When I'm very much of the mindset, like Hayek, when folks get into government, they want to find something to do. It's like, what do we do with our hands? They're going to pass laws. That's what they're going to do. And so I just think maybe I'm just like overly pessimistic, realistic. I don't know. But I just think that's the gravity that exists. Is that every state has, because it's enshrined in constitutions, there are going to be laws that crop up around education. I do want to make sure that they are as flexible and student-centric as possible. That's where I'm coming from.
Well, let's go to Jefferson and then Steve. Yeah, Jefferson.
So I want to get back to a question that Dan asked a little bit earlier that I feel like nobody quite answered, which is, we talk a lot at this conference about choice being the thing that we need to measure, and it sort of being sufficient as a measure of the system. One of the reasons why we do other things is because there are sort of distal outcomes that matter as a result of the education system. One of the reasons we measure and credential is because there are coordination and information problems in a broader system. And I feel like a lot of the conversation is getting to this place where you sort of destroy all of the quantities that allow that coordination, that create quantities of trust. Even in a decentralized crypto environment, your token or your certificate is worth nothing if I don't know what it means, if I'm trying to make a judgment on it later on. So I guess the question is, in a world where all of the dynamics everybody is describing are true, what are things that we feel like we can actually measure over time in a system where it's not like choosing a restaurant? You're doing a set of things that need to lead to something at the end that matter for both individual to individual coordination and the construction of a society.
Yeah, Satoshi Nakamoto addressed that in the Bitcoin white paper with peer-to-peer and consensus.
Right, but
consensus is what Heather was talking about, agreement, mutual agreement, and then peer-to-peer system. I trust you, so I trust him. I trust this school because I know that school, and this is something that we can do peer-to-peer. Same thing with transactions, but it's the same thing with school. I don't trust Harvard, but I trust Howard Gardner. You see what I mean? I might trust Harvard. I might trust this school, but not another one. That's a peer-to-peer decision to make. We shouldn't have, my opinion is we shouldn't have third parties doing that. But I'm sorry, I think that you wanted to say something about the previous question.
No, it's okay. Did you have a clarification?
I guess the clarification is I just don't think that the type of transaction we're talking about with Bitcoin is the thing that we talk about with education. It's not a one-to-one choice. It's a thing that needs to confer and convey trusted information down the line. And so part of the measurement problem is figuring out things we can do now that ultimately lead to that in the long run. And choice isn't one of those things. I mean, it may be a necessary condition, but it feels insufficient for the conversation we're having. So I just want to push.
Sounds like you're asking, and I might be misunderstanding it. It sounds like you're asking, like, what the measurement is important because they are going to go out into the world, and so it does matter, like, what we're measuring?
Yeah.
It's
why we measure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I think it goes back a little bit to your question about Like what are we measuring and what is that common ground? Yeah. And I don't know if I've just like a little bit lost faith in humanity, but is there a common ground? Like, I don't know that there is a common ground with how humans have evolved. And so I worry a little bit that I think that's why I lean on transparency for me to say, like, I think that it is important that kids learn math, reading, writing, etc., and also learn this character development as I define it, X, Y, Z, right? And then people can opt into like, oh, yes, that's what I agree to. But I don't know that there is I don't know that everyone can agree on that foundation.
All right, so I guess we have to have this session again next year. We're at the end of our time here. Thank you to the panelists for a very lively discussion. All right, we'll see you at the Charles in a bit.